In this video, we'll cover how the CloudGenera platform helps the financial operations professional execute on better cloud cost planning for Azure virtual desktops. As an agenda, we'll first go through some of the benefits of running virtual desktops in an Azure environment. Then we'll discuss the information that will be required for you to make a good estimate around virtual desktop total costs for your business. And lastly, we'll take a look at how CloudGenera's Cloud Assist can be used to estimate the total cost of ownership of an Azure virtual desktop environment. First, let's start with the potential benefits of an Azure virtual desktop environment. As a foundation, managing virtual desktop environments can be expensive and time-consuming for businesses today. In addition to the desktops themselves, organizations have to manage infrastructure that brokers connectivity to the desktops that have been virtualized. And there are a set of activities that are required to maintain service level for these desktops as they're accessed virtually and remote from a user's PC. The potential benefit of Azure virtual desktops is to reduce this expense and this impact on your productivity by providing a virtual desktop environment that's managed by Microsoft. And in this way, the broker, the gateway, all of the load balancing, all of the management activities to support a virtual desktop environment, they are now absorbed by Microsoft. And it's Microsoft's labor and Microsoft's technology that's providing that part of the VDI solution. This will reduce the operational workload as well as the management complexity associated with supporting a virtual desktop environment. Next, by leveraging Azure infrastructure and paying for what you use, as opposed to having dedicated infrastructure to support a virtual desktop environment, there are potentially use cases where you can lower your total cost of ownership by enabling a pay-per-use model as an alternative to how VDI is typically deployed in a dedicated fashion in a data center today. Okay, with that as a foundation, now let's figure out what data is required to estimate Azure virtual desktop costs. There are 5 elements of information that translate to cost in an Azure virtual desktop environment. First, user counts and usage profiles. We need to know the number of people who will be accessing these VDI environments. We need to understand their behavior of use. Next, user access rights. Based upon your current entitlement with Microsoft, you may have access to Azure virtual desktops without an additional cost. So companies with a Microsoft 365 plan or a Windows 10 enterprise software license that's current on software assurance, if those licenses are either in the E3/E5 for the enterprise or A3, A5 for education, you will already have access to virtual desktop. And the decision then is, does it make sense to take that license that you've already purchased and apply it for your desktop environment? Next item of information required are the technical specs. So essentially for each persona, what are their requirements for CPU, memory, and disk? In Azure, you have a large number of options that you could select from. So making good decisions, making a good selection on the minimum configuration required will translate directly to the total cost of ownership of an Azure virtual desktop environment. Related to those personas and the capacity that they need allocated to them inside their virtual desktop environment, another important consideration for Azure virtual desktop and understanding total costs are how you will leverage storage and networking. Unlike your data center, where networking is a shared expense across the institution, ingress and egress charges can add up in the cloud. And again, these virtual desktops, while they are managed by Microsoft, they don't change the economics of cloud, meaning you still have to account for the performance of the storage and the networking. And you have to understand what the behavior of use will be to have a good estimate of your total cost of ownership. And last not least, geolocation preferences and or geolocation requirements. Do these desktops need to live in a particular geography, either based upon a regulatory or security or service level need? These are the main elements of data required to determine what your approximate costs will be running an Azure desktop environment in the cloud. Okay, now let's take a look at how you can leverage Cloud Assist to estimate your costs. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to run a comparison of an Azure VDI environment under an on-demand, a 3-year reserved, and a 1-year reserved license model. What's been done in preparation for the demonstration is we filled out information related to the current costs of an existing VDI environment. We define those personas and their behavior of use and the configuration of desktops that they need access to. We were thoughtful about security and service level. And last but not least, we defined user demographics, the users and their behavior of use specifically. So the first thing that we see here is an executive summary coming out of CloudGenera's Cloud Assist software. It's estimated our annual total cost of ownership, so our ongoing operating expenses, as well as estimates for capital expense as well. So from a capital expense perspective, think the infrastructure that needs to be refreshed every so many years to make sure that VDI environment is supported in a way that will be reliable and performant. The engine's also estimated a cost to transition. So if we're going to set up an Azure VDI environment for the first time, there's going to be a cost to defining those personas, defining those desktops, configuring that environment in a way that reflects how your organization operates a desktop environment. And then the value of the engine is that it will calculate, based upon those requirements specified, total cost of ownership. And so here you can see the financial benefit of committing to a 3-year expense around this Azure VDI environment and how that compares to 1 year, as well as on-demand pricing. And in fact, as deployed, 24 hours a day, environments always accessible, always on, the on-demand costs actually would result in a negative ROI. It would have a greater total cost of ownership when compared to an estimate of a current total cost of ownership. And again, for clarity, this is approximately 100 VDI user environment. The benefit of CloudGenera from a cost planning perspective is being able to understand at a very clear and transparent level what costs will be associated with operating this virtual desktop environment in the cloud. And so you can see here how the software is able to identify that there are different compute configurations based upon the license model that might make sense. So the reserved license models have access to technology that was not available in the on-demand license model. So from a cost planning perspective, the engine's automating, figuring out where the best configuration is across those different license models. The engine's also estimating our costs. So we are going to have a cost for the Azure infrastructure. We're going to have a cost for the storage to support that infrastructure. And in our model, we also assume that we would be buying net new Office 365 licenses. And so that cost is incorporated in the expense as well. As a reminder, if you already own that Windows license and you're current on software assurance, or if you're already a Microsoft 365 subscriber, either in an enterprise E3 or E5 or student A3, A5, this cost here would not apply. Okay, now that we've taken a look at some of the comprehensive detail, estimates of compute, estimates of storage, estimates of software, the one other thing we talked about that you have to be mindful of in an Azure Virtual Desktop environment is the bandwidth you'll consume on a monthly basis. Data transfer out of the cloud is not free. And that's one of the things that will contribute to your expense. So when you're estimating an Azure Virtual Desktop expense, again, you need to be mindful of that data transfer and what those charges could be. You need to be mindful of whether or not you own the license or you're going to be buying a license. You need to be mindful not just of the size of the storage, but the performance of the storage, because that will change the recommendation on how the Azure infrastructure is provisioned to support your VDI environment. And then lastly, you need to be mindful of what types of Azure infrastructure, what instances best map to the personas and the profiles of the needs of your user community. And so this is a high-level summary of the type of output that the CloudGenera engine automates and how it can help you execute on better cost planning for Azure Virtual Desktops. Now, let's take a level deeper. How did we get to this business case? And how can you use this engine to take this foundation of analysis and customize it to the needs of your organization? Well, first, around demographics. One of the benefits of moving a desktop environment out of your data center and to the cloud is that ability to enable pay for what you use. And in the first example we showed, where we compared those reserved license models to on-demand, it assumed that these desktops would always be accessed. We would never turn them off, and they would be utilized 24 hours a day. Something as simple as changing average daily use could give you two benefits. One, it'll reduce the total cost of ownership of that Azure infrastructure to support your VDI environment. Two, it actually has a security benefit, because the best way to avoid an attack, a cyber threat, is to not be present. And so if, when you transition your virtual desktop environment from the data center to the cloud, you embrace this ability to automate the provisioning and the deprovisioning of these workspaces, you'll actually get a security benefit, not just a financial benefit, by reducing the footprint that's visible and accessible to the internet at any point in time. As discussed, we did provide an analysis based upon 100 users. Again, this is completely customizable. If you have 1,000 or 10,000 or a few hundred, a simple edit will redo the calculus and you'll have a more current total cost of ownership. Also completely configurable within CloudGenera's cost planning capabilities are the ability to update and provide your own ingress and egress, right? So to take this directionally correct assessment for 100 apps and to personalize it to reflect what's truly being utilized in your VDI environment today, or a new VDI environment you might be modeling for the first time. Again, based upon those personas, the ability to spec out the CPU, the memory, right? This is actually a pretty large configuration. Microsoft usually recommends a 2x4, but just for comparison's sake, we're going to keep this the same. So you can see the impact of pay for use versus pay upfront. And to showcase that, let's come back to the original output, right? The best opportunity for us in the original output based upon that 24-hour use model was a 3-year reserved and a total cost of ownership of $147,000 and a payback period in 7 months. Now, let's take a look at just an on-demand model and leveraging 8 hours of use and paying for what we use as opposed to leaving infrastructure on and idle when workspaces are not being accessed. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to rerun our analysis. We'll specify the 8 hours of use. And observe we actually could save $7,000 more per year in an on-demand purchase model versus that reserve purchase model. And from a financial operations perspective, the value of your capital, not having to pay up front for a 3-year contract, but to have the flexibility to just pay as you use and to preserve that capital for other investments that might be needed for your business. So in summary, whether you're moving dedicated infrastructure to a dedicated VDI model, or as we just saw in this scenario, taking advantage of pay for what you use, there's a lot of variability in estimating the costs associated with an Azure Virtual Desktop environment. With the CloudGenera platform, the financial operations professional has the utility, has the tool that they need to be able to accurately estimate the total cost of ownership and identify where the best business case for your business might reside. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at cloudgenera.com. Thank you in advance for any feedback on the video, and look forward to helping you with better cost planning around other use cases in the future.